We move on to the last speaker for today. And again, like all of us, is a remarkable speaker, Dr. Pankaj Saxena. Dr. Pankaj Saxena is an associate professor at Rashram School of Public Leadership, and he extensively writes on art, aesthetics, Hindu architecture, history, literature, and has published more than 100 articles and research papers in various magazines. And he has authored 2 books so far. He is also director of Indic Academy affiliated Rashram Center for Cultural Leadership. And one of his major passions is visiting temples so as to understand them in a better way as a focal point for Indian Hindu ecosystem. And he's visited 1,200 ancient Hindu temples all over India. His paper for today would be contemplating upon does secularization lead to Christianization? I request Pankajji to please give his insights on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushant, for introducing me and inviting me to speak. The topic today is does secularization lead to Christianization? Sitaram ji has been, needless to say, I keep saying this on every platform that I speak or everywhere that I write, that it is he who made me a Hindu again. Like many of my age, I had become a communist and at least sort of fashionable atheist in the sense that I would publicly disown most of the Hindu traditions and practices and would espouse with secularism or atheism. Reading him, my guru introduced me to him 22 years ago. And after reading him, I became a Hindu again. And I got introduced to this movement. One of his major thrusts in scholarship was Christianity. He was one of the foremost Hindu thinkers and scholars of 20th century India. And he focused primarily on 2 fronts. On one hand, he created a great critique of the ideological enemies of Sanatana Dharma. And on the other, he documented matters of Hindu pride and placed them in the context of the great spiritual tradition of India. As a result, the primary focus of his research was Christianity and the activities of Christian missionaries. He has written many books on Christianity like Jesus Christ and Artifice for Aggression and History of Hindu-Christian Encounters. In these books, he dealt with the theology of the Bible, the activities and modus operandi of the Christian missionaries. Though all of his works on Christianity are very important, in many ways, Catholic ashrams, sannyasis, and swindlers remains his most important work on this subject. In this work, he exposes various tricks and frauds of the missionaries, which they use to convert Hindus. The primary focus of this work is the so-called institution of Catholic ashrams, a result of the indigenization and enculturation drive of the Catholic Church. The book begins with the lament of various Christian missionaries in India, in which they are complaining that the Hindus are very hard to convert because their resolve for dharma remains very strong, and their identity is not one but many, and ensconced within the security of many layered Hindu identity. They feel no reason to convert to an alien religion of like Christianity. As a result, they fall upon the Christian missionaries. They fall upon the fraudulent methods of conversion, in which they adopt the outer symbols of Hindus to fool the population that Christianity is just another sect of Hindu dharma. This is what is called as indigenization or enculturation. The book elaborates the methods and history of various of these Catholic ashrams. This is not the place to go deep into the history of this particular movement. Anyone who is concerned with the issue deeply can read the book. Nobody can sum up better than what Sitaram ji himself said. Suffice to say here that various Christian sects adopted terminology, phraseology, as well as dresses, symbols, and habits of Hindu tradition and Hindu dharma in order to fool Hindus and convert them to Christianity. What is of particular interest in today's talk is a comparison that these Christian advocates for indigenization make. They compare the situation in India in 18th and 19th centuries to the situation of ancient pagan Greece just before it was converted to Christianity. It is very important to read what one of these missionaries, R.H.S. Boyd, thought in this regard, and it is very significant. I quote, "As we reflect on the process by which Christianity in the earlier centuries became acclimatized in the Greek world and by which it made use of certain categories of Greek thought, we are struck by the double face of its acceptance of secularized Greek philosophy and philosophical terminology. and its complete rejection of Greek religion and mythology. Very importantly, Greek religion was gradually secularized. Philosophy was separated from what had been a religio-philosophic unity. This is very important, religio-philosophic unity. The religious content, which had already been deeply influenced by secularization right from the time of Aristophanes and Euripides, developed into a cultural, literary, artistic entity encapsulated and isolated, except in the Orphic and mystery traditions from that living existential faith which transformed man's lives. So he's making a very important point that religion as a living tradition, religion as a living system was dismantled first through the process of secularization. Of course, this term was not prevalent back then. They are back projecting this tendency, this word on the tendencies and attitudes that were prevalent in ancient Greece. And they are saying that on one hand, the philosophy was digested. Philosophy was accepted, whatever was acceptable, whatever was possible to couch in Christian terms, in biblical terms, was accepted. The rest was discarded or neglected. But it was the most important thing is that the living tradition, it means the rituals, customs, and tradition of the ancient pagan Greek religion was separated from the philosophy. And he claims that it also happened when Christians had started living in the Roman Empire. They had started watching the ancient pagan religion of Greece, and their prominent thinkers, and they started doing this to Greek religion. So this is very important for our purpose here today, to pay attention towards this, that how a living tradition like Hindu Dharma is divided into two halves. One is concerned with philosophy and scientific disciplines like Ayurveda, let's say, connected to medicine and other thing, or yoga. And on the other hand, there are the living traditions, customs, and rituals of that dharma. And these two are separated. Philosophy is digested somehow, and the tradition is at first slandered. It is called as superstitious and then destroyed gradually. We'll talk about this. So he talks about a very crucial stage in the process of Christianization of ancient Greece, which boasted one of the greatest philosophical as well as mythological traditions of ancient Europe and Near East. He claims that it was the secularization of the pagan religion of Greece which helped Christianity convert pagan Greeks to Christianity and to destroy their ancestral religion in their motherland once and for all. He does not stop here, but says that a similar process is going on in India in 20th century. And he's writing in 1969. And if the secularization of India continues apace, then it will weaken the hold of ancestral religion of India on Hindus, and subsequently Christianity can swoop in and convert Hindus to Christianity, claiming this heathen land for Christianity once and for all, finally. He believes that the demythologization of India is one step forward in the Christianization of India. He says, there is at present a rapid process of secularization going on within Hinduism. It would seem, therefore, as though Hinduism were already started on the path followed by Greek religion. And so we are led to question of whether or not it is legitimate for Christian theologians to use and adapt categories of what is still purports to be religious Hinduism, and yet is very largely secularized. What indeed is the real meaning of the word Hindu? Does it describe the fully mythological Hindu religion? Does it describe certain philosophico-religious systems? Or is it simply a synonym for Indian culture? We shall find that some Indian Christian theologians, notably Brahma Bandham, have believed that Christianity was not incompatible with cultural secularized Hinduism. And you see today, as we'll see later on in this talk, that people who are essentially against the very ethos of Hindu Dharma or Hindu tradition, they write books like Why I'm a Hindu, and they claim that this is real Hinduism. And what the traditional carriers of Hindu Dharma are saying, it is not Hindu Dharma. SITARAM rightly claims in this book, after this quotation, that it was more the brute force of Christianity used by the state and the military, because when Christianity became a state religion, it could use all the might of the state, and it was a very powerful state at that time. So it used the force of the state and the military, which crushed ancient pagan Greek religion. He says that intellectual casuistry did not play a primary part in its destruction. This is true to a large extent, and we can say that the city-states of Greece were destroyed one by sheer brute force of the state. But what R.H.S. Boyd was speaking upon a very important Christian strategy vis-a-vis any pagan dharmic sect, and particularly against Sanatana Dharma. The ability of Christianity to use secularism against the native indigenous religion. It uses the capacity of secularism to loosen religion's hold over the indigenous people on one hand, and to repackage Christianity is nothing but a secular appendage, a fashionable and hip option to the orthodox old religion. Let us go over Boyd's claims one by one. Crucial to the process is the rejection of pagan dharmic mythology, as it is essential to demythologize the native tradition. This is not the place to go into the history of Greek religion, but suffice to say that before the influence of Euripides and Aristophanes was indeed what Boyd was claiming it to be, the extreme disrespect in the divine and sacred notions of Greek mythology, and the extreme disbelief in anything divine in these places could have played a part in demythologization of the people. Similar process was going on in Rome in the West. For understanding this process, we need to delve a little deeper into how Dharma, or ancient natural religion, makes itself known to all of its followers. Hindu Dharma, through its various scriptures, has created the greatest corpus of darshan or philosophy in the world. But nobody believes that even in ancient world, it was possible for every practicing Hindu or Sanatani to be well versed in the highest spiritual principles of the tradition. Darshan in India was very different from philosophy in the West, and yet the vision of the Upanishads is not something that can be easily grasped by the common man. It is true that in ancient times, the reach of Dharma and even Darshan was far greater than it is today, obviously. But even in those times, not everyone was privy to the vision of the Upanishads as well as some of its greatest practitioners. But even then, the fact remains that this vision was shared by everyone. Sanatana Dharma, in its infinite wisdom, found ways to share this vision with those who were not able to partake of the logic and vision of the Upanishads directly. This is the reason behind the creation of the idea of the Pancham Veda. The Natya Shastra was created so that through drama, the vision of the Vedas is taken to the common man. The goal of the Itihasas, both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, was to take the vision of the Vedas and the Upanishads to the common man. The institution of the Hindu temple itself became a vehicle of conveying the greatest ideas to all nooks and corners of Bharatvarsh. In essence, this conveying of the idea of Sanatana Dharma was done by creating a shared vocabulary, which was coherent through multiple disciplines and religions. The shared symbolism and common metaphors that pervaded not only all the disciplines of art, but also the disciplines of philosophy and sciences, resonated with the common man through the mythological stories that he heard through the agencies of the Itihasas and the Puranas and the Agamas in his daily life. The metaphors that the Indian sculptor applied while creating a sculpture were the same as metaphors that are common in Hindu darshan, and the same metaphors carry over seamlessly into Hindu iconography. The stories that the devotees would listen to and narrate in their daily lives were the ones represented on temple walls. The mantras that the devotees daily recited were the ones that invoked the exact same attributes of the gods depicted on the temple walls and in the Garbha. These abstract and esoteric notions were carried through very popular means like Katha Pravachan Parampara, in which the stories of great heroes became carriers of abstract ideas. The highest of meanings were conveyed through the commonest of rituals, creating a shared vocabulary that enabled even the common man to understand the meaning and symbolism of the most complex of mantras and philosophy. The hold of Sanatana Dharma on its devotee was made possible through various means which were neither suffocating for the individuals nor too neglectful of the cultural and social concern. Through the means of dharmic education centered in temples and various other dharmic institutions, the idea was dharma was carried to every nook and corner of India. So this is how Sanatana Dharma connected to its followers and its devotees. And it was this link of Sanatana Dharma and its followers which was broken in modern India when the British came to India and supplanted its beautiful educational system with a foreign and essentially Christian means of education, though under a secular garb. During the British times, the Christian missions were more blunt in their approach, and they were openly trying to inculcate a hatred of Hindu Dharma and Hindu students, and simultaneously trying to inculcate Christianity in their hearts. The intent of these missions seems very clear under the British occupation of India. But what most people fail to recognize is that the same Christian colonial attitudes were carried on hook, line, and sinker in independent India in the post-independence era under the garb of secularism. The famed secular principle of separating the church and the state was misused to distance Hindus from Hindu Dharma. Dharma was no longer taught in India's educational institutions to the Hindus. Espousing secularism became a noble task, and denunciation of everything Hindu or Sanatan became a central quest of India's secularism. And this is what Sri SITARAM GOEL says, I quote, The strangest thing that has happened is that the religion of this country is no more Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is now supposed to be some sort of a primitive superstition. Some people take up Vedanta and talk a lot about it. Some others take up the Gita and talk about the Gita. Some others take up and talk about other aspects of Sanatan Dharma, Yoga, Ayurveda, and so on. They acquire name and fame, write books, and give lectures. But when it is pointed out that it was Sanatan Dharma which created all this spirituality, all this philosophy, all these laws, all this culture, not many people are prepared to accept it. A new religion has taken the place of Sanatan Dharma. This new religion is secularism. Unquote. Secularism in India actively worked for the vilification and slander of everything Hindu. It is one of the seminal contributions of SITARAM GOEL that he proved this sorry development. I quote again from his book, India Secularism. Secularism in India today means denunciation of Hindu society, denunciation of Hindu culture, denunciation of Hindu history. It means denunciation of everything which is Hindu. The word Hindu itself has become a dirty word. In the language of India, secularism, Muslims are a minority, Christians are a minority, but the Hindus are a brute majority. This is the religion of secularism which is replacing Sanatan Dharma. So here in India secularism, he is clearly stating that India secularism has practically come to mean anti-Hinduism. And if an anti-Hindu ideology is instituted as a state ideology in a country which is in majority Hindu, you can consider the amount of devastation and destruction, cultural and dharmic destruction that it brings in its way. And any ideology like Christianity, which is militant in origin, they are always prepared to take over and usurp a society like this, which is in chaos, which has been uprooted. It was a double tragedy for Hindus that this happened to them. On one hand, the traditional institutions which played the job of imparting Hindu education were either destroyed willfully or were decaying by the agency of state neglect, like the Hindu temple. On the other hand, mainstream education supported by the state not only blacked out Sanatan Dharma and its instruction to Hindus under the garb of secularism, but actively inculcated Hindu hatred in Hindus under the pretext of secular education. This process became very fast under the prime ministership of Indira Gandhi. Sitaramji attests to this fact in Hindus and Hinduism. A generation of Hindu children, neglectful or hateful of Hindu Dharma, was growing up. The word Hindu was thus not only robbed of all the pride and prestige it had acquired over the past several centuries, but also made synonymous with crimes committed by foreign invaders against the indigenous people. At the same time, the word Hinduism was made to mean not only primitive superstition, but also an oppressive social system, which he wrote in Hinduism. So we find that he is trying to expose the fraudulent means that Christian missionaries use. He first states the lament of the Christian missionaries that Hindus are not converting. Then he documents the history of inculturation and indigenization in India. And in that day, after documenting that history, he once again says that even after this, that strategy largely failed because Hindus would not be fooled to accept something like Christianity against something like Hindu Dharma. But we see that 30 years later, this book was written, Catholic Ashrams was written in 1988. 30 years later, more than 30 years later, the situation is no longer so. By this time, some residual Sanatan Dharma was working in Hindu society. But now even the need to fool Hindus into Christianity is now no longer there. We have created a generation of deresignated Hindus, which is ready to accept Christianity as it is. 30, 40 years ago, if you would ask most of Hindus that whether they are ready to convert to Christianity under any pretext, most of them would repel this proposal with vehemence, saying that no, they are not ready to do so. But today, this is no longer the case. And let us understand how. On one hand, the Hindus were no longer taught what Dharma is in post-independence India under the guise of secularism. Actually, Hindu Dharma, its tradition and living culture was vilified in Indian textbooks written by Marxists and secularists who institutionalized Hindu hatred in Indian academia in the 1970s. On the other hand, alternative Hindu institutions which could play this role were either actively destroyed or decayed through state neglect. Secularism was thus actively used to weaken the hold of Sanatan Dharma on its followers. While secular Indian state stopped the instruction of Hindu darshan and dharma to Hindus, what happened to the living tradition, which we were talking about? This living tradition had managed to survive under the Islamic invaders in the Middle Ages and also under the British occupation. In the first few decades of independence, this living tradition continued apace, despite everything that was being taught to Hindu children in the schools. Hindu culture and Hindu Dharma continued in the privacy of Hindu homes for 2 to 3 generations after independence. That is why most of the fraudulent designs of indigenization and enculturation failed, as documented by SITARAM, GOEL, and Catholic ashrams. In early 20th century, it was impossible that a large number of Hindus would accept Christianity in any form with or without the use of fraudulent means. The living tradition of Sanatana Dharma made them intuitively sensitive to something as deeply alien and adharmic as Christianity. But the attack on Hindu Dharma was multi-pronged, as always. Hinduism's enemies did not fail to perceive that they need to destroy the living tradition of Sanatana too. Dharma reveals itself to its followers in the form of tradition. This tradition makes itself known in the form of rituals, customs, and festivals that we all celebrate. It is these rituals, customs, and traditions that make the living culture of Sanatana Dharma. And in the past 70 years of India's independence, this living culture has come under direct attack from various quarters. But how did this happen? One of the major theses of Sitaram Goel and Sri Ram Sarup is the claim that religion is not dharma, and that Hindu dharma is diametrically opposite to prophetic monotheistic ideologies like Christianity and Islam. Most of the Hindus before the entry of Gandhi on Indian political scene had an intuitive understanding of the fundamental opposition of Christianity and Islam to Hindu dharma. This Vivek or discrimination was destroyed after Gandhi mainstreamed the slogan of Sarvdham Sambhav India. This mindless slogan was repeated ad nauseum by Gandhi Congress Party and then by every other significant political party and leader in India, and also by the academia, media, judiciary, police, and other important institutions of the state. For the last 70 years, we have been continuously taught that all religions are same, that Hindu Dharma is just another religion amongst many. It is just another choice in the beautiful bouquet of religions. This has led to a neglectful attitude amongst Hindus. We have become accustomed to neglect the strategy of the enemy ideologies. We have become accustomed to explain away every hostile act of the alien ideology in some non-religious terms, and not attributing the blame where it rightly belongs. Christianity, taking advantage of this neglect of Indian state in the post-independence era, entrenched itself deeply in every major institution of India. It targeted some of the most important and prominent institutions of a democracy, like education, and thus influenced 3 subsequent generations of India. But even more dangerous than that, they started targeting institutions of popular culture like the movie industry, the ad industry, and the market. The situation has reached a point where very subtle anti-Hindu and pro-Christian agenda is being bombarded on Hindus from every side without everyone being any wiser about it. Most of the positive religious symbols are Christian in this popular culture, while Hindu Dharma always has negative associations. Movies, serials, and commercials target one Hindu festival like Diwali or Holi at a time, or one Hindu tradition like Kanyadan on one hand. But one by one, by targeting one tradition, one symbol at a time, they are destroying the living tradition, the living culture of Sanatana Dharma. And because they are doing this discreetly and one at a time, nobody is invited. Even this propaganda would have fallen on deaf ears a few decades ago, almost completely. But the secular and anti-Hindu indoctrination of our children in schools and university has created a generation of deracinated Hindus who feel no connection with Sanatana Dharma and its traditions. Being added on the mindless slogan of Sarvdham Sambhav, they really think that all religions are same and changing one for another is not a big deal. And having approved it from living culture too, they really buy into every fashion fad like the campaign against Kanyadan and think of it as a great virtue, failing to see the subtle Christian push behind this seemingly secular or liberal agenda. Just as B.H.S. Boyd claimed about the ancient Greek religion, Hindu darshan has been packaged as a great philosophy, but always in complete isolation of its culture. As Sri Rajiv Malhotra also says, a digestion of Hindu tradition and philosophy is going on, where yoga is no longer Hindu, Ayurveda has got nothing to do with Hindu dharma, and Hindu art is Indian art, and so on. While Hindu philosophy and science is digested on one hand, Hindu traditions are killed one after another. Diwali has been forced to become silent. Holi has been virtually banned. Nag Panchami is legally banned on the pretext of ecology, and various other Hindu festivals are selectively persecuted, shamed, and banned by the state, and actively slandered by popular culture, often under a very overt Christian agenda. As festivals are the most vibrant carriers of public dharma, the destruction of Hindu festivals means a destruction of public dharma in India. On the other hand, themes based on Christianity and Christian festivals and symbols pervade the market completely. All Hindu kids are forced to wear Santa costumes in schools. Bodybuilders on Instagram are paid by the church to pose with Santa caps. At the same time, Hindu rituals are attacked as superstitious, misogynistic, and anti-liberal in one ad at a time, one movie at a time, one serial at a time. The most important Hindu rituals like Kanyadana are attacked from all sides. Without Kanyadana, Hindu wedding just becomes a Christian wedding with ethnic flavor. Hindu marriage is attacked from all sides and the feminist and LGBTQ perspectives. So Hindu family is attacked. Hindu family is the greatest carrier of the living tradition. Any family anywhere is the greatest carrier of a living tradition. And as you destroy the family, that passage of living tradition from one generation to another stops almost completely. This is extremely easy to understand. A culture is passed on when three generations live together in a single house. While mother and father go on about the heavy lifting, hard work, the daily hard work, the grandmothers and grandfather, that generation coaches their grandchildren into what tradition is, what rituals are, what customs are, what dharma is. And as we live in nuclear families now, increasingly not even in nuclear families, but just broken individuals here and there, this passage of living tradition is no longer possible. This would not be so tragic had there been an institutional mechanism to impart dharma by the state or by other organizations. But on one hand, while our state refuses to teach Hindu dharma to Hindus, let alone to other to followers of other tradition, and the Hindu state, the Indian state refuses to teach Hindu dharma to Hindus. And on the other hand, other institutions which could have stepped in, which were performing as educators of Hindu dharma, imparters of Hindu tradition in traditional Hindu society, like the Hindu temple, they are also now taken over by the state in various cases or destroyed through sheer neglect and state apathy in other cases. So as we speak, all of this is going on. As a result, a generation of designated Hindus has been created by all the above mechanisms. A lethal cocktail is created. Firstly, this generation no longer knows intuitively or intellectually what dharma is. Secondly, they consider India's secularism with inbuilt anti-Hinduism to be the only sacrosanct idea to be practiced religiously. Thirdly, they really think that all religions are the same by being added on the Sarvam Sambhav slogan, and that if India is converted to Christianity, then it is no big deal. And really, if you coach your children again and again daily into this slogan that all religions are same, there is absolutely no difference, they are just the same, then they will start thinking that what's the big deal if an individual converts to another religion, or if the entire society converts to another religion, they are virtually the same. What's the big deal if they convert from one religion to another? So we have inculcated this, and despite various warnings of SITARAM, and this is his contribution to our movement, that he said that to criticize Christianity and all the alien ideological enemies of Hindu culture and civilization and Sanatana Dharma is extremely critical. It is not just enough to praise what you have. It is not just enough to propagate yoga and Ayurveda and the soft power. You have to make a very blunt, very direct critique of Christianity, all the alien ideologies that are attacking Sanatana. Otherwise, because they use fraudulent means to convert your population, so you have to be very direct in their criticism. And anyone who has not listened to SITARAM GOEL and has gone on with the slogan of Sadham Sambhav or any form of secularism has contributed to this degradation of dharma in the minds of our kids of our next generation, where they think that it's all the same. Fourthly, they are no longer privy to the living culture of Sanatana Dharma as family gets destroyed and traditions are not passed on. They are unable to perceive, due to all this, the Christian push behind seemingly neutral events around them and readily buy into the agenda. In India, more than any other country, Christianity has been able to project itself as a modern and progressive force. And thus, these deracinated Indians are like sitting ducks to the extremely suave Christian missionaries. A rootless generation is easy target for a militant minority. Sri SITARAM GOEL has asserted this many times in his work. We see the results of this lethal cocktail in many states of India. 3 states in the northeast are now completely Christian. Andhra Pradesh in the south and even Punjab in the north are now succumbing massively to Christian missionaries as we speak. In independent India, despite Sitaramji's warnings, we led the church to create a state within a state in India. Sanatan Dharma, despite all odds, held out till 6 decades. But in the last decade, the result of this lethal cocktail are all too visible. India's espousal of secularism, which aimed for separation of the living culture of Hindu Dharma from its darshan and science, at least in India's case, India's secularism is leading to the Christianization of India. In order to fight Christian missionaries, Hindus need to throw away secularism and openly accept Sanatan Dharma as its guiding principle. This is extremely important because in 1988, while Sitaramji was writing this book, he documents that even after the fraudulent means of Catholic ashrams of indigenization, of inculturation, the church is largely failing in converting Hindus because there was a great resistance amongst common Hindus, despite all the active collision of the state, media, academia, judiciary, and every other institution with Christian missionaries, with the church, in the conversion of Hindus. Despite all of this nexus, there was a great opposition, resistance to Christianization amongst the Hindus because the living tradition was alive. But this living tradition is now no more. That resistance that Sitaramji speaks about even in 1988 is now all gone. So the situation is far worse than even while he was speaking in 1988. He warns us in very hard, very strict terms. But the situation has deteriorated far more in the past more than 30 years. And we see its result in Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, and various other states of India. Tribal community of India is now being increasingly targeted by these Christian missionaries and converted one after another, and to apathy in state, in media, and academia, and in general in the society. As I said earlier, 40 years ago, it was hard to find anyone or to find a great community which would say that, what if we convert to Christianity? But now we have come to a stage where a generation of Hindus they find no difference in Hinduism and Christianity. They are no longer practicing Hindus because their living tradition is dead in many of these urban homes, at least if not completely, that largely in many of the metropolitan cities of India. And this is aiding and abetting the Christianization of India. And this process is a direct result of secularization of India. So in order to stem the tide of Christianization of India, in order to reclaim India from Christianity and other forces, in order to reclaim India for Sanatana Dharma, we need to actively denounce secularism, actively disown secularism, and explain the process of link between secularization and Christianization, so that we can reclaim India for Sanatana. Thank you. I would like to end here.
Thank you, Pankajji. There are two questions, but I think they resonate with the same core idea. So I'll kind of combine them. The first question talks about the notion that most of the Christians in India were generally Dalit or scheduled caste. And this is an assumption that the question makes, who faced inhuman level of disrespect from the upper Hindu castes, and also the angle of poverty was existing. Then it goes into the notion that is it Hinduism's own fault that led to this proselytization, led to this proselytization? And the second question kind of talks about the philosophical aspects of Hinduism and the Abrahamic religions.
Let me answer the first question first.
Yes,
otherwise,
sir.
I'll forget.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is a very common charge on Hindu society that that we are getting, many societies, many communities are getting converted to Christianity, and it is our own fault. It is a fault of Hindu Dharma and Hindu society. I'm not denying that there is no fault in Hindu society. Every society has its own share of faults. Every society has its own shares of evil. Hindu society also has its own share of evil, like any other. But for Christianity to take benefit of it and to convert a significant part of it without providing them any better life is like saying, and I will make this very, very graphical and allegory. This is like saying that a girl is found alone in a jungle, and it's the fault of the girl that she gets raped by a band of men who go there. Because why was she there? It is not the fault of the rapist, it is the fault of the victim, actually. So this is, here you are blaming the victim instead of blaming the perpetrator of the crime. So just because there is a fault line in Hindu society, every society has fault lines, and this is how Christianity has succeeded in the past. They use the fault lines of a native society, and they convert a certain sections, and then they turn them against their native society, like a virus would do, like a zombie apocalypse is supposed to do in Hollywood movies. And this is how they progress from country to country, by destroying country to country. This is how they rage cultural fires and destroy civilization after civilization. But we have to ask, we have to show them the data and all the research, that what have they done to their own minorities, what have they done to the LGBTQI community in their own countries when Christianity was ruling these countries. They were throwing them from rooftops, they were killing them. In 1940s, the father of computers, Alan Turing, was forced to castrate himself because he was a homosexual. And he committed suicide after that. This happens in 1940s in the West. So they were doing this to their LGBTQ community. They were burning women on stakes. There were poor laws in England, and in 17th, 18th century, within the city confines, certain communities could not enter because they did not belong to the class, to the elite noble class. So this is how they behaved in their own countries, in their own domains, while Christianity was dominant there. So we have to show this data that they are just using these fraudulent means. They offer absolutely no sense of respect to these people except some initial financial assistance. After that, there are separate Dalit churches in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu. They are, and you can find various lists, various instructions of Christian missionaries, where the greatest price to convert a Brahmin girl, if you want to convert a Brahmin girl, you are awarded the most. If you are converting a Dalit girl, then the price is not so great. So they have these distinctions in their own churches. They are offered no dignity of their own. So just because there is a fault in Hindu society, and we have to work upon that, I'm not saying that we should not correct our faults, but that does not at all mean that Christianity can swoop in and convert this. So our job is to keep popularizing the track record of Christianity, which is extremely horrible in its own countries where it was very powerful, and to show that what they do to sexual minorities, to religious minorities, what they did to Jews and other gypsies and other minorities, what they did to women, what they did to the homosexuals and every other kind of minority. So we have to show their track record. What the progress that they made in the West was not because of Christianity, but despite of Christianity. It was after the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment that modern ideas, they separated the church from the, rightly in the West, the church from the state. And certain freedoms they managed to gain in those countries. And that is why in the West, they have come to a stage where many of these distinctions are no longer there. But that is not because of Christianity. The success of Christianity is that it remakes its image in every successive generation and manages to claim the fruits of its opposite ideologies as its own. So now it is proposing, now it is propagating that it is very hip and very modern, that it accords you the freedom. Like in South India and many, especially in Andhra Pradesh, they are propagating Christianity by saying that you can drink wine and liquor and make merry. This is what Christianity is all about. What about these stupid Hindu restrictions on various of these things, taboos on various of these things? So they have managed to repackage Christianity in every age. And in this age, they have managed to repackage it as a hip, party-going, wine-drinking religion, which any fun-loving individual should espouse. So this is what their track record is, and we should do all we can to show what Christianity actually does to a society. All the while, working on our own society, working on our own population, working on the real grievances that various communities feel. That goes without saying. Thank you.
Okay. On that same note, a small question that the highest goal of Hinduism is self-realization and enlightenment from infinite cycles, proposing that there is transmigration of soul and rebirth. However, the highest goal of all Abrahamic religions is permanent heaven because they don't believe in rebirth. Then the question goes into the notion that then any ordinary person would like to choose Abrahamic ideas over Hindu ideas, and then your comments are expected. Yeah.
Any
Ordinary person would choose Abrahamic ideas because they imply that you go to the heaven permanently after death, over Hindu ideas which believe in transmigration of soul and the cycle of life and death. The question asks that what are your comments on that?
No, I don't think any ordinary person would be attracted to Abrahamic religions based on the promise of heaven, because the descriptions of heaven, if you see in certain medieval Christian texts or modern Islamic texts, the description of Jannah that are there, they can only appeal to a very sick mind, which is just obsessed about sex and nothing else, and which is so absurd, which goes to absurd lengths to say that that the sexual union can last for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, and that's all that happens in heaven and Jannah, that you go on forever like this. There are various descriptions to that effect. On the other hand, we say that the highest goal in Sanatana Dharma is self-realization. That does not at all mean that it is the only goal. In fact, this is true about Buddhism to a large extent, that they discuss on self-realization, on nirvana, and then they have a practice of meditation and also the theory of what goes with meditation or what is nirvana. Although their approach is very negative, they keep denying what is not nirvana or what is not liberation. But they have a theory and a practice, but they seldom think about the society as such. They think about a society of monks. In Sanatana Dharma, it is exactly the opposite. Sanatana Dharma thinks about not just a person who wants to get and achieve self-realization, but to everyone. Dharma is about samsara. Dharma is about organizing samsara, so that we lead very dharmic lives and we enjoy those lives. So if you, for example, if you want to become an artist, if you want to become an entrepreneur, you can become so. If you want to become a businessman, you can become so. If you want to become a politician, you can become so. If you want to follow any other tradition, you can, any other profession, you can become so. You can enjoy your life in all of these things, all the while practicing a dharmic life, living a dharmic life, practicing dharma while you do all of this. So it is possible. Sanatana Dharma is all about samsara. Dharma Shastras talk about organizing society in a way which is most conducive to dharma. Dharma exists for the sake so that it can take care of every commoner, not just about the one who wants to attain self-realization. Otherwise, moksha would be enough. Upanishads would be enough. There would be no reason to create Puranas or Agamas. There would be no reason behind creating hundreds and thousands and lakhs of temples. There would be no reason behind all the Hindu art, music, drama, art that they created. There would be no reason behind writing the Ramayana or writing the Mahabharata. All of this is useless from the point of view of moksha. A single text, a single Upanishad, Ishavasya Upanishad or Kathopanishad or any other Upanishad is more than enough for the purposes of moksha. Why did our rishis, our ancestors, go to such great extent so that everyone can take part of it? It is because Sanatana Dharma is a hold-all discipline institution. It incorporates everyone inside itself. A Hindu temple, that's why its primary goal is to have darshan, which is in the direction of self-realization. When you go to in front of the Garbhagriha and you have darshan. But along with that, there are all sorts of activities that go on in a temple. There are families living in and around the temple. They contribute to various activities that happen in the temple. This fact is reflected on the walls in the architecture and sculpture of the temple. This fact is reflected in the constitution of temple as a living system, which incorporates entire cities and towns into it. If you go to various towns in Tamil Nadu, in Srirangam, in Chidambaram, in Thiruvannamalai, you see that even architecturally they have incorporated entire towns into the very architecture of the Hindu temple. So keeping dharma at center, they have incorporated entire society into it. That is because they want to include everyone inside Sanatana, everyone in the ambit of dharma. My jati kaistha, we do not belong to any varna. We are not Brahmins, we are not Vaishya, we are not Shudra, we are not Kshatriyas. Because we might have violated some rule of Varnashram Dharma in our history. But even then, though we are not within Varnashram, within the four Varnas, we are not outside Sanatana Dharma as such. Similarly, there is a rule, there is a charya when you go to a temple. So you cannot eat beef or you cannot do a certain things if you want to have darshan. So the Garbhagriha, the priest officiates, the archaka officiates with the deity in the Garbhagriha and the devotee. And most of the people are allowed to go to the temple. But over the time, certain communities and individuals and people were excluded. Not one community, but different communities over different periods of time. They were excluded in those because you have to follow a certain charya, and those people and those communities was thought to not following those charyas during those times. But even then, the Hindu temple incorporated a tradition where even those people who are not following any tradition which is required to follow the temple, they would be included in the system. How? They created the system of Utsav Murti and Rath Yatra. So for at least once or various times during the year, the same deity who is Brahman, who is sitting in the Garbhagriha of the temple, his Utsav Murti would go on a Rath Yatra of all the city, the town and the city nearby, so that everyone, without any distinction, can have a darshan of Bhagwan. So this is how Sanatana Dharma incorporates. Tirth Yatra is exalted all the time. All the people are said that you have to go to Tirth Yatra, you have to go to all of these places. But then there is a story of Ganesh and Kartikeya, where they say that when Kartikeya, he was very agile, very handsome, and he had a very fast vehicle, the peacock, and he went around when he was ordered to go around the universe. He just quickly went around the universe. And Ganesh could not. He was fat and he had a rat as his vehicle. So he just went around his parents 108 times. And because the parents represented the universe, he was declared the winner. So here, on one hand, they keep creating all of these tirthas and keep exhorting Hindus to go to these tirthas. And on the other hand, in order to include those who are not willing to go to these tirthas or cannot go to these tirthas due to some reasons, they are willing to incorporate them by this story, by stating exactly the opposite of what they wanted to convey through the idea of tirth. This is the beauty of Sanatana Dharma. It actually accepts every goal, every dharmic way of life. Not every, I won't say that you can do anything and call yourself a Sanatani or Hindu, but they try to incorporate every ambit of human life into that goal. So the self-realization is the highest goal, but not the only goal. That is Buddhism. It is not Hindu Dharma. It is not Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma incorporates all of these ideas. So within Sanatana Dharma, you have absolutely no issue with one sort of behavior, one sort of lifestyle. Like we believed in multiple lifestyles, multiple value systems. So the most strict value system was Brahmins were supposed to follow the most strict value system because they were also responsible for some of the greatest creations in our history. So they were supposed to live a very strict life. But what we call as Shudras, they were not supposed to live that strict lives. They enjoyed their lives. They earned their livelihood through a profession which was passed on to them or which they liked. They enjoyed their life and they were very free. Even if you go into society, even today, if you see those who are grouped as SCs and STs and OBCs, even the sexual modes and customs are quite open in those societies. Only in Brahmins and certain Kshatriya communities, you see that they have very strict notions about sexual modes and customs. In other societies, it is possible very easily for a woman to leave a husband just because she does not like him and to go start living with another man. And it is acceptable in the society, and the Hindu society accepts it when that particular community does it, not when Brahmins would do it. So this is how we incorporate various lifestyles. You will be one that's why some people are confused that India is the land of Kama Sutra, and on the other hand, they say that India is the land of the strictest of brahmacharya. India is the land of both. Both of these traditions went on, not the tradition of Kama Sutra I'm saying, but very open sexual modes and customs, and on the other hand, also very strict value systems. Because it had different values attached to different lifestyles, different results attached to different lifestyles. What suppose, are we vegetarian? Are Hindus vegetarian? Or does Hinduism recommend vegetarian or not? For someone who is on the path of self-realization, yes, very much. For a Brahmin, yes, very much. For a Vaishya, yes. But not for Shudras and not for Kshatriyas. In these communities, it is very much accepted. Even in certain Brahmin communities, if they are postal, or if they live in difficult terrain, or if they follow some Shakta traditions, they can easily consume meat, and they do consume meat. So there is no one value system which you can impinge like this on Sanatana. So self-realization is the highest goal always. Yes, that is true. In everything that we do, we nudge you. Sanatana Dharma nudges you towards that highest goal, but that is far from the only goal. That is why you can be as free as you want within the confines of Sanatana. On the other hand, if you espouse any system like Christianity, you have to believe certain. While you go to a church and eat that bread and eat that wine, you literally have to believe that you are literally drinking the blood of Christ and eating the bread into the body of Jesus Christ. If you do not believe that, you're not a Christian. They will force you to keep believing in this. You'll have to force in the promise of Christianity and all things which come with that. So I would like to stop at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj. Dr. Ramakrishnan has a question or a comment.
Yeah, it is just a follow-up to Dr. Pankaj's answer to the caste and conversion question. So, of course, if there is a problem in our society, we have to address it regardless of whether it causes conversion or not. You know, if there's a problem with our society, it is we who have to address it. There is no two opinions about that. On the other hand, there is a question that we must ask, that if, for instance, tomorrow, Hindu society magically becomes devoid of all evils. Okay, every kind of evil, whether gender-based, caste-based, language-based, region-based, whatever. Will conversion efforts actually stop? This is the question that needs to be asked, so that Hindu society is educated about, doctrine. Because the fact of the matter is, conversion is not going to be stopped until the entire world gets converted, so that the second coming can be facilitated. Yeah. Yes, there are many useful things. If there are fissures in society, they help in doing the conversion, not a problem. But removing those fissures is not going to magically solve the conversion problem either. Those problems have to be dealt with on their own merits. Yeah, that is the comment I wanted to make.
Very true, because they keep claiming that India is the only country where we have this evil institution of caste. So why did they convert the African community? Why did they convert the North American or South American communities? Why did they convert South Korea, for instance? So all of these reasons fall flat when you see history, when you see the track record of Christianity. That's why I say that we constantly have to keep showing the track record of Christianity in its own lens, what it did to its own people while it was ruling there. People will tell you that why are you focusing on the negative things all the time? But this is necessary because they keep attacking us. One of the primary exhortations of Sri SITARAM GOEL was that we have to turn the tables. We have to stop defending our tradition, all the while working on social welfare and social improvement within our society. We have to stop defending our traditions to Christian missionaries, to outsiders, and we have to start attacking them on very factual, historical, and valid reasons. There are reasons to attack them because they really have done a lot of bad in their past. There is something really evil in their theology itself. So we have to keep reminding our populations, keep discussing these things in public at any cost. Now the time has come. Now the time is more than come as compared to any other times. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj. There are certain questions still in the chat box, but I'll briefly try to summarize them, and a quick response I think would be sufficient for that, because already much have been spoken in the same regard. So the question is by Mahendra Pankhya ji. He asks that Despite the Vedas, Upanishads, and the kind of epic civilization that existed before any of the Abrahamic and the Islamic invasions, why were our ancestors not able to defend their country, defend their sisters, mothers? Why the temples were broken down and a barbaric horde of Arabs destroyed our golden way of life? How was this made possible? Then there is a sub question, then which goes into the colonial history where Hindus were deprived of their rights and Muslims were appeased. And why now, in the contemporary point, Hindus are not able to teach Gita in our schools? Now there is an existential threat to Hindus in India itself. What are the views of the panel on this?
The first question, the second question, I think I have answered that our constitution doesn't allow us to teach Hindu. So that is our founding fathers made it legal that we cannot teach our Hindu dharma to our own people. So the second question is very easy to answer. The first thing is that why didn't we defend why were the temples broken? It's completely false that we didn't defend.
Yeah, exactly.
And SITARAM has written specific books on this particular topic, heroic Hindu defense to Islamic invaders. That everywhere Islam went after its advent in 7th century, it was almost instantly successful. Persia was fallen within 10 years. Ancient civilization of Persia. Byzantium, they pushed down and almost completely destroyed in the next 40 to 50 years. And they reached in the same century to so far as Morocco, and then crossed the seas, and they entered into Europe through Spain, Portugal, and even crossed the Pyrenees mountain and reached France, and they were only stopped in France. If they had not been stopped in France at that time, actually Europe would have been, it is a possibility that Europe would have been converted to Islam even in those times. On the contrary, they start knocking on the gates of India in 7th century itself. But it takes them 5 full centuries to go past Sindh and Baluchistan, our borders. Only in the age of Ghori, when Ghazni and Ghori, that Islamic Sultanate is established in India in the age of Ghori. And in between, after 3 centuries, there is a complete lull. But Mahmud Ghazni is then the first great successful invader of India, but he could never stay in India. He always had to run back. Only after almost 2 centuries later that Mahmud Ghori establishes, the Ghurids established Delhi Sultanate. So it took them 5 centuries to establish their rule in India. And even after the most brutal genocide of any people on earth, a continuous genocide of 5 centuries, we are still in this land around 80%. Is that not a miracle in itself? Would that have happened had we not defended ourselves? Would that have happened had we not defended our women, our children, our temples? After so much destruction, after lakhs and lakhs of temples destroyed, we still have lakhs and lakhs functioning in India. Generations after generations spent themselves so that these traditions could be carried on to future generations. So it's not like we didn't defend it. Ultimately, we were defeated because of various reasons, and because the entire society of Islam is geared into a war machine. They do jihad while they eat. They do jihad while they relieve themselves. They do jihad while they brush themselves. And I'm not saying this to say this. This is actually very literally true. The entire civic life, they have no civil life. Entire civil life is geared toward war. The entire Muslim life is geared toward war and aimed towards the non-Muslim society. Now, it is very effective when an entire society is thinking all the time about how to destroy the non-Muslim society. It will become successful, but then it destroys their civil life. You can see what the quality of life is in Pakistan or any other country, which is constantly about destroying life in other countries. When Islam took over most of the Middle East, they were the most advanced civilizations of that time. What happened after that? What happened now? Now all the money that you see, it is because of the oil that they discovered there. Otherwise, they took control of Byzantium and Persia and destroyed that civilization. They destroyed the connection of India and Europe, and thus the flow of dharma from here to there was also stopped. This is what they did. But because they concentrate everything into a war machine, they become successful. Our singular fault is that we practiced ethics with them, and we still keep practicing ethics with an inherently unethical ideology. That many of our kings, they let the Islamic invaders go, when they defeated them. But we all know that Islamic invaders, they never let anyone go. They raped the women. They killed, beheaded small children or converted them to Islam. They poisoned the wells, destroyed the crops. They did not leave food untouched. They did not leave women, children untouched. They did not leave our temples untouched. And we practice all sorts of ethics with the enemy. So Sanatan Dharma, Sanatan Dharma does not preach this. For Sanatan Dharma, the best or the highest goal of a Hindu or Sanatani is to defend Sanatan Dharma anyhow. That is why Ram even used fraudulent means to kill the evil king Bali, because his primary goal was to defend and dharma and not to show off of to virtue signal goodness in him. He was not, if he was given to virtue signaling like Hindus are in this day, we would be talking about ahimsa and unconditional non-violence. But no, he had to carry on Sanatana Dharma. That wisdom was lost in the Middle Ages itself. Some attributed to the influence of Buddhism and also to other internal decay that had sat in our society. So our fault is that we practice ethics with an unethical end. And not because we didn't defend ourselves. We defended ourselves like no other country and nation on this earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj.